Hello, this is Claudia, and for the next hour I'll be reading from the July 22nd issue of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Saudis reached deal with U.S. that could let them enrich nuclear fuel. U.S. lawmakers and Israeli officials have expressed opposition to such a plan to be announced Wednesday, fearing that the kingdom could use a civilian nuclear project to develop nuclear weapons. The Trump administration plans to announce Wednesday that it has reached a broad nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia that could lead to the country enriching its own fuel for nuclear reactors, U.S. officials said. The accord is intended to further bind the United States with the Saudi government as the war with Iran strains the relationship. The Trump administration, according to officials, estimates it will provide billions of dollars for the U.S. nuclear industry, starting with Westinghouse, which designs many of the reactors sold abroad. The Trump administration plans to formally sign and announce the agreement with the Saudis on Wednesday, said two U.S. officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to discuss sensitive diplomacy. It would announce the details to Congress soon afterward. Although the agreement likely would have support among many Republicans, some U.S. lawmakers from both parties, along with Israeli officials, have expressed opposition to such a plan, fearing that the kingdom could use a civilian nuclear project to eventually develop nuclear weapons. Secretary of State Marco Rubio told reporters traveling with him in Manila on Wednesday that he had nothing to say about any nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia. Maybe later today, once Washington wakes up, there is an announcement, he said. I promise you'll know about it. Asked about concerns that the agreement could lead to Saudi Arabia developing nuclear weapons, Mr. Rubio said, suffice it to say, the U.S. is not going to reach any agreement with any country in the world that leads to the risk of proliferation. The accord has been under discussion for years, and during the Biden administration, it was envisioned as part of a broader deal that would include Saudi diplomatic recognition of Israel. But after the October 7, 2023 attacks on Israel by Hamas, that prospect receded. President Trump separated the proposal for U.S.-Saudi civilian nuclear cooperation from any demand that Saudi Arabia recognize Israel. The agreement will require a review by Congress, which under the Atomic Energy Act has the power to vote a resolution of disapproval, but as a practical matter, the agreement would likely pass because Congress would have to assemble a veto-proof majority to override Mr. Trump's initiative. Nonetheless, debate over the accord is likely to be fierce. To get the deal done with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the country's 40-year-old de facto leader, Mr. Trump had to agree to terms that may limit international inspectors from going to any sites in the country that they think could be a pathway to diverting fuel to weapons projects. And he agreed that after a joint study with Saudi Arabia on the economics of producing nuclear fuel, the Saudis may be allowed to enrich uranium or reprocess plutonium on their soil. The Wall Street Journal reported Tuesday night that Mr. Trump had approved the agreement. Prince Mohammed has vowed he would build nuclear weapons if Iran does so, even insisting in one interview he would do so without a doubt. Iran has had a nuclear program that it says is intended for civilian use, though it has enriched uranium to near weapons grade following Mr. Trump's withdrawal in 2018 from an Obama-era nuclear deal. Mr. Trump then ordered U.S. forces to join with Israel to attack Iran's nuclear sites in June 2025 and to start a war against Iran this February. Mr. Trump and Prince Mohammed agreed to proceed with U.S.-Saudi civilian nuclear cooperation during a visit to the White House by the prince last November. U.S. and Saudi officials have been in talks on a plan since then. They were finalizing the details this spring and summer and aim to share the plan with Congress soon, the New York Times reported earlier this month. The agreement includes two secret side letters reached with Saudis. The administration is expected to argue they contain proprietary business information and deal with sensitive national security issues. But some members of Congress may not be willing to vote for the accord until the letters are all made public. The type of deal that the Trump administration has reached with Saudi Arabia is called a 1-2-3 agreement, pronounced 1-2-3, which establishes a legal binding framework between nations on nuclear cooperation. The obligations of such an agreement are aimed at ensuring non-proliferation of nuclear weapons. The United States has 26 agreements with 41 governments and the International Atomic Energy Agency. Mr. Trump's concessions to the Saudis on the terms of the nuclear deal are significant. When the United States entered into a similar agreement with the United Arab Emirates, which went into force in 2009, there were far more restrictive conditions. The UAE agreed to the stringent inspection, signing what is called an additional protocol with the International Atomic Energy Agency, and it agreed to forego the right to produce its own fuel, cutting off the possibility that it would have the infrastructure to produce a weapon. That agreement became known as the gold standard for nuclear non-proliferation, and while the administration plans to argue that it will have other restrictions in place, including joint partnerships with the Saudis that will allow Washington to keep a close eye on the kingdom's program, the fact remains that Mr. Trump has retreated from the restrictions negotiated by the Bush and Obama administrations. While the bulk of the negotiations with the UAE took place while President George W. Bush was in office, it was finished by President Barack Obama and went into effect in 2009. During the first Trump administration, Thomas J. Barack Jr., a businessman and top fundraiser for Mr. Trump, proposed to the White House that U.S. companies, including his own private equity firm, help Saudi Arabia build nuclear power plants. That proposal stalled in part because of Saudi reluctance to agree to American non-proliferation policies. The Biden administration had talks with the Saudis on a civilian nuclear deal as part of a proposal that would have the kingdom recognize Israel. In April 2025, soon after Mr. Trump returned to office, Chris Wright, the Energy Secretary, discussed a proposal with Prince Mohammed on a visit to the kingdom 6 months before the prince's visit to Washington, U.S. officials said. Mr. Trump and Prince Mohammed clashed in May over U.S. aggression in the Iran war. The prince refused to let the U.S. military use Saudi airspace for an operation to escort commercial tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, which Iran's forces essentially control. The civilian nuclear agreement helps put U.S.-Saudi relations on more stable ground again. During the Biden administration, the United States and Saudi Arabia we're also discussing a mutual defense agreement as part of the broad plan that would include nuclear cooperation in exchange for Saudi recognition of Israel. The Saudis have long pressed U.S. officials for a mutual defense agreement that would be ratified by the Senate so that future American presidents could not easily back out of one. Saudi officials wanted such an agreement in part to deter against Iranian aggression. Mr. Trump and Prince Mohammed reached an understanding during the White House meeting last November on a defense arrangement between the two governments, which would include the sale of advanced F-35 fighter jets to the kingdom, but that fell short of a treaty that the administration would present to the Senate for ratification. During the Iran war this year, Saudi Arabia has relied on the United States to provide interceptor missiles for air defense against Iranian projectiles. However, Saudi officials have concerns about whether American policy in the Middle East, including the U.S. partnership with Israel, is increasing risks to Saudi Arabia and other Gulf Arab nations. In part because of that, Saudi diplomats have been trying to hold talks with Iran. The two countries normalized diplomatic relations in 2023 in a deal brokered by China. Did the Cyclospora outbreak start here? They're always going to blame us. In central Mexico, a lettuce-growing region has been potentially linked to an outbreak in the U.S. that has sickened thousands. When Carmen Ramirez learned that a parasite was turning Americans' bowels into gurgling time bombs and that the outbreak had been traced to Guanajuato, her home state in central Mexico, she could not help but giggle. I found it pretty funny, Miss Ramirez, 31, said while helping her father staff the counter at their family-owned grocery store in Dr. Mora, a quiet agricultural town of about 30,000 people. Now we're mostly known because of the diarrhea in the U.S., she said, but she grew concerned when she saw that health officials said that they had traced cases of tainted iceberg lettuce back to her hometown, specifically to a shredding facility owned by Taylor Farms, a producer of vegetables and salad kits that has become a household name in the area. The California-based company is known for being the region's most important employer, including for young adults and single mothers. Even the hint that Cyclospora, the parasite behind the outbreak that has taken over the news and inspired memes and songs, may be linked to Taylor Farms, could jeopardize the livelihoods of company employees, lettuce growers, market vendors, and their families. This could hit us pretty hard, Ms. Ramirez said. On Sunday, Taylor Farms announced that the Food and Drug Administration had apologized after a test for Cyclospora turned out to be a false positive. The FDA denied having offered an apology and said that the false positive did not change the overwhelming epidemiological data driving its inquiry into Taylor Farms. FDA's traceback investigation and outbreak data continue to converge on shredded iceberg lettuce from Taylor Farms locations in central Mexico. The agency said Taylor Farms has removed all iceberg lettuce sourced from Guanajuato from the U.S. market as grocers and retailers pull its products from shelves. While health officials in the United States have reported more than 11,000 confirmed and suspected cases of the illness, the Mexican health authorities on Tuesday ruled an outbreak in their country indicated that only 3 cases have been detected. The illness caused by the parasite is marked by violent cramps, unrelenting nausea, and in many cases sudden urgent bursts of diarrhea. You're barely able to make it to the toilet, said Alejandro Marcias, an epidemiologist and physician at the University of Guanajuato. Dr. Marcias agreed that not enough cases have been detected in Mexico to declare an outbreak, but noted that cyclosporosis is not an infection regularly tracked by the country's health officials. No deaths have been documented in either country. Several residents in Guanajuato, Mexico's undisputed lettuce powerhouse, which sends most of its harvest to the United States, insisted that they had not fallen ill. Mexican stomachs, they joked, are simply built stronger than American ones. I'm going to keep eating lettuce as usual, said German Buenrostro, age 20, a student in San Jose Iturbide, a city of about 90,000 near the Taylor Farms facility. If I end up with explosive diarrhea, at least I'll lose some weight, saves me a trip to the gym. Some were skeptical about the findings announced by U.S. officials. They're always going to blame us Mexicans, said Renato Ferro Mendoza, age 44, as he stacked heads of lettuce at his market stall. You can't trust anything Americans say. This is not the first time the company or its processing facility in Guanajuato, which sources from many farms in the region, have been the focus of FDA investigations. Following a cyclospora outbreak in 2013 that sickened more than 600 people in the United States, officials identified the culprit, a bag salad mix packed at the Taylor Farms processing plant in central Mexico. The investigation, however, failed to pinpoint the exact place, water source, or person that enabled the parasite to enter the supply chain. Taylor Farms resumed operations at its Mexican processing facility shortly after. The current cyclospora cases in the United States have set off fears of changes in trade policy that could ripple through the local economy in Mexico. These issues can really affect our town, our quality of life, what little business we have, and our few sources of income, the mayor of Dr. Mora, Edgar Javier Resendez Jacobo, said in an interview. Imagine all that production from local growers just sitting idle, with them having no clue what to do with it, and the people working on those processing lines. What becomes of them now? That's the real concern. The outbreak comes at a sensitive time for trade relations between the United States and Mexico. The two countries will continue talks this week to review their trilateral trade agreement with Canada, which on Monday was slapped with, punishing new U.S. tariffs on many of its exports. Mexico is also dealing with its own set of tariffs and levies imposed by the Trump administration, including a 17% duty on the most of its tomatoes. It's going to get ugly, Hector Enrique Lopez Espedia, and our economist in Guanajuato, said after the investigation into Taylor Farms and Mexico's lettuce. What Trump's going to say about this? They're going to roll out a mountain of new rules to shield the U.S. market and completely screw over Mexican trade. On Tuesday, Mexico's health minister, David Kirschenbeck, said at the news conference that the health authorities had collected several samples from farms in Guanajuato and were testing them for cyclospora. So far, no evidence has been found that would allow us to conclude that it originated there, he told reporters. However, we are taking every precaution in the event that it did. A spokeswoman for Taylor Farms, Mindy Mayhew, did not respond to specific questions. New York Times journalists went to the company's processing plant in Dr. Mora, a sprawling complex surrounded by towering fences, vast vegetable fields, and sparse nurseries, but were refused entry and were told to communicate with Miss Mayhew. At the entrance on Monday, a visitor's log showed that inspectors from COFEPRIS, Mexico's federal health regulatory agency, were touring the facility, and at a nearby market in San Jose Iturbide, Sylvia Soto washed shredded lettuce before assembling tortas. For a line of hungry breakfast customers, the product is supposed to get tested before export. So whether it was a mistake or whatever happened, that's an investigation best left to the experts, Ms. Soto, age 29, said when asked about the Slycospora outbreak. But geesh, it definitely hurts us because people start second-guessing the food with all the buzz the story is making. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Trump joke at Kennedy Center is left out of Netflix special. At the Mark Twain Prize ceremony, the comedian Whitney Cummings made a joke about the president that seemed to refer to Jeffrey Epstein. A joke about President Trump and sex trafficking that the comedian Whitney Cummings made at the Mark Twain Prize ceremony was among those left out of the special released on Netflix on Tuesday. The ceremony honoring the late-night host Bill Maher was held at the Kennedy Center, where Mr. Trump is chairman. He did not attend the June 28th event, which took place the same month his name was removed from the building's facade following a judge's order. I actually heard Trump may have even wanted to come tonight, but he couldn't make it. He got caught in sex traffic, Miss Cummings said from the stage. The joke received modest laughter before Miss Cummings added, "They did not tell me to say that." Mr. Trump has been found liable for sexual abuse but has not been accused of sex trafficking. The joke seems to nod to his previous association with Jeffrey Epstein, the financier who was charged with sex trafficking in 2019 before killing himself in jail. Mr. Trump has denied any involvement in or knowledge of a sex trafficking operation. The special did include a joke Ms. Cummings made about Mr. Trump's influence on Kennedy Center programming, telling the crowd to enjoy this fall's 3-month run of White Hamilton. It was not clear why the sex trafficking joke was not included or who made the decision. While it's our preference not to cut jokes from anyone's set, the Kennedy Center has a contractual right to do so, Netflix said in a statement on Tuesday. In a statement, the Kennedy Center said that edits to a show are always made in a collaborative way to produce the best product for broadcast. Representatives for Ms. Cummings did not respond to requests for comment, although she did on social media. I was super clear that Netflix did not cut anything from my Mark Twain Prize set. Netflix always supports comedy and comics. Quit spreading rumors, you weirdos. Other jokes the comedian made on stage at the Kennedy Center were not included in the Netflix special, such as a riff on Mr. Maher as a stern stepdad who cares maybe a little too much because he wants to prove that he won't abandon us like our forefathers did. Ms. Cummings discussed her experience at the Mark Twain Prize ceremony on a recent episode of her podcast, Good for You. "This is the only time you shouldn't get censored," she said, because it is about comedians using humor to criticize our elected officials. She also spoke about the sex trafficking joke without providing specifics. "They said we would like to cut it out. The people at the venue have been amazing," she said. "They didn't want to silence anyone. It is true that their boss is Donald Trump, so they did their job." On the podcast, Ms. Cummings said she was dubious about the possibility of litigation until she remembered that Mr. Trump once sued Mr. Maher for $5 million after the comedian joked that the president had been fathered by an orangutan. Ms. Cummings explained in a different podcast episode that she had dropped another Trump joke she delivered in rehearsal after she was told, "We'll get fired if you say that." In addition to Ms. Cummings' sex traffic joke, the Netflix special also excluded her follow-up statement about her task as a comedian. "The thing about comedy is that we aren't scared," she said at the ceremony. "We try not to be scared of the people that bully." AI is lifting markets and the economy and raising risks for both. Investment in artificial intelligence and related companies is lifting the stock market and spending across the economy. There is an adage in the financial world, the stock market is not the economy, except that right now, maybe it is. Major stock indexes have set record after record in recent years, fueled by seemingly boundless appetite among investors for anything connected to artificial intelligence. The total value of the U.S. stock market has more than doubled over the past decade to over $75 trillion, roughly 2.5 times the annual output of the entire U.S. economy, itself a record ratio. Much of that value exists only on paper, bets on future profits that may or may not materialize in the years ahead. But the boom is supporting real economic activity today, pumping trillions of dollars of investment into semiconductor factories, data centers, power plants, and transmission lines. And the wealth it is creating is helping to drive consumer spending, particularly among affluent Americans whose appreciating stock portfolios make them more willing to shell out for luxury vacations, pricey electronics, and meals at high-end restaurants. That spending and investment have helped carry the U.S. economy through a tumultuous period of inflation, tariffs, and geopolitical uncertainty. But it also creates a vulnerability. If investor confidence in AI falters, the economic activity built atop it could come crashing down. Bank of America's monthly Global Fund Manager survey for July reported a bursting of the AI bubble as the key risk to financial markets. It's also now the key risk to the economy. The thing that has been holding everything up is the AI story, said Torsten Slok, the chief economist at Apollo Global Management. AI-related stocks account for roughly half of the rise in the S&P 500 this year, said Adam Turnquist, the chief technical strategist for LPL Financial, adding that growth in the economy is also increasingly dependent on AI infrastructure spending. It's becoming one big AI trade, he said. Stock markets have wavered in recent weeks in a sign of investor worry over so much dependence on one sector's ability to continue outperforming expectations. But this isn't the first instance of investors flinching during the AI run-up. Several times over the past few years, stock prices have dropped steeply in response to a piece of bad news, only to rebound within days. Even many analysts who believe an AI bubble is still inflating are reluctant to predict that this is the moment it pops. Declines in stock prices, even drastic ones, don't necessarily have much impact beyond the world of finance, hence the adage about the market not being the economy. On Black Monday in 1987, the Dow Jones Industrial Average fell more than 20%, still the record for one-day decline, yet broader measures like the unemployment rate and gross domestic product barely wobbled. What could make this time different is the sheer scale of the stock market. Economic research has found that for every $100 investors gain in their stock portfolios, they spend about $3 more on goods and services, a phenomenon known as the wealth effect. The wealth effect also operates in reverse. When stock prices fall, investors become less willing to spend. At its present valuation, a 30% decline in the stock market could lead to a nearly $700 billion pullback in consumer spending. That could be enough to set off a recession on its own, or at least come close. Times when the market seems like its highest are times when the wealth effect can have the biggest bite, said Gabriel Jodorowsky, a Harvard economist who has studied the wealth effect. The other distinguishing factor of the current market is how concentrated it is in a handful of companies. The Magnificent Seven group of companies of Meta, Alphabet, Amazon, Apple, Tesla, NVIDIA, and Microsoft account for roughly a quarter of the value of all publicly listed stocks in the United States. Because so much real-world activity is also being driven by the AI boom, a stumble by one of the big AI companies could have much larger economic ripples. It would spill over to the rest of the economy, said Roger Aliaga Diaz, the chief economist for the Americas for Vanguard. Mr. Aliaga Diaz and other economists described one scenario for how that could happen. If companies find that their AI investments aren't paying off as quickly as they hoped, they might pull back their spending, forcing the AI labs and their suppliers to trim their growth projections. Such a disappointment could incite a market sell-off, which would make it more difficult or more expensive for companies to raise the capital they need to fund the AI build-out. That in turn could lead companies to delay or cancel plans to build data centers, power plants, and related infrastructure, giving way to layoffs in the construction industry. And at the same time, the drop in the market would push wealthy consumers to pare their spending, leading to wider job losses and ultimately a recession. The consumer spending growth is not nearly what AI growth is, but it is such a large portion of the economy, said Christina Hooper, the chief global strategist at Man Group, and growth there is being driven by high-income consumers who are tied to the fortunes of the stock market, and AI being such a big part of that. A turn in those fortunes is not inevitable. Many of the biggest AI players have already raised vast sums of capital, which could allow them to keep spending, even if new sources of cash dry up, and companies won't necessarily stop using and paying for AI tools just because the market enthusiasm for them dims. A bursting of the AI bubble could also free up cash for other investments that have struggled to attract capital in recent years. That is, at least in part, what happened in the 2000s when the end of the dot-com boom led investors to redeploy cash to housing and other sectors. The economy did experience a recession in 2001, but it was brief and relatively mild. One factor that helped insulate the economy in 2001, however, was that the Federal Reserve cut interest rates aggressively, which helped contain the crisis mostly to the tech sector. This time around, inflation has been elevated for 5 years, which might leave policymakers more reluctant to cut rates. Monetary policy has a huge role in determining whether a decline in investment demand in one sector spreads more broadly or not. Mr. Chodorow-Reich said, "The fact that monetary policy is a little bit more constrained weighs in on that. It could be years before policymakers are forced to deal with such a scenario. Economists are notoriously bad at identifying bubbles and even worse at predicting when they pop. Alan Greenspan, the former Fed chairman, warned of the risks of irrational exuberance in the markets in 1996. The dot-com bubble didn't burst for over 3 more years. I am of the view that it is very hard to predict recessions or recession timing," Mr. Chodorow-Reich said, but he and many other economists think the risks of a market-induced recession are real and growing. That is partly because investors are betting on such spectacular growth from the AI companies that even a fairly mild disappointment, an earnings release that falls short of expectations, a project that takes longer to pay off than initially assumed, could lead them to reevaluate their assumptions and produce a steep drop in the markets. If investors are told, well, actually, instead of 5 to 7 years, it's going to be 15 to 20 years to pay off, that's a very big difference, said Ryan Cummings, the chief of staff for Stanford Institute for Economic Policy Research, who recently published an article warning about the risks of an AI bubble. Right now, the burden of proof is on the skeptics, he added. Once you have this slow trickle of disappointing information, then the burden starts to be on the optimists. What happened when Meta used AI to ban accounts on Facebook and Instagram? Users said the technology mistakenly deleted their accounts. To resolve the issue, they still had to rely on AI. The notification startled Camille Hansen awake one night this March. Her Facebook and Instagram accounts, where she had nearly 1 million followers running a business with her husband teaching English to non-native speakers, had been flagged for deletion. Meta said she had violated the community guidelines for fraud and deception. "I'm just an English teacher," Ms. Hansen, 40, remembered thinking. She was flummoxed by the fraud and deception claims. "What am I doing wrong?" she wondered. The notice said she could appeal, so she clicked the button to begin the process. A week later, she got another notification. Her appeal was denied. "All your information will be permanently deleted," Meta's response read. "You cannot request another review of this decision." It was like having an actual physical business and somebody just shuts down your office or your storefront. Ms. Hansen's husband, Calvin, age 42, said in an interview from their home in Portugal. What happened to the Hansens was a case of artificial intelligence gone wrong. The technology is increasingly responsible for deciding which accounts broke Meta's content rules, while also managing the appeals for those decisions, adding to people's distress. It is often difficult for users like the Hansens to reach anybody at the company to figure out what to do. In March, Meta announced plans to hand more power to AI bots to decide which accounts to ban or harmful images to remove. Months later, the company laid off thousands of employees, including those who did those jobs. Users have organized online, with more than 60,000 recently signing a petition asking Meta to provide more information about account bans and to let humans review appeals. Several communities on Reddit and elsewhere have been bombarded with complaints from Meta users about the company's AI. Daniel Roberts, a Meta spokesman, disputed the AI was worse at handling accounts than humans and said the company's new AI moderation tools make 13% fewer mistakes than human employees and find 10% more violations. of the 5 accounts the New York Times flagged to Meta. All were banned by the company's old AI moderation tools, Mr. Roberts said. We're committed to making fewer enforcement mistakes and helping individuals protect their accounts, and AI is delivering on both, he said. Meta has grappled with several instances of AI going awry. In May, hackers exploited its AI customer service chatbot to attack 34,000 Instagram accounts, including a former White House account of Barack Obama's. That same month, the employees revolted over a program that tracked their keyboard movements to train AI, leading Meta to pause the effort. Last week, 26 former Meta employees said in a lawsuit that the company has laid them off using an AI algorithm that targeted them for having disabilities. A Meta spokesman said that workforce management and organizational decisions were and are made by people, not AI. People Over Platforms, a user advocacy group that sells account recovery services, created the online petition this year to compel Meta to change its account moderation policies. Meta has accused many of the signers of sharing child exploitation material, a charge that users said added insult to injury, and then banned them. That was the accusation Meta made against Athenia Rodney, the owner of Juneteenth New York, a group commemorating the end of slavery in the United States, where the company banned all of her personal and professional accounts on Facebook and Instagram last year. Our technology found your account or activity on it doesn't follow our rules, the notice from Meta read. As a result, our technology took action. Ms. Rodney said that she did not understand Meta's rationale because her group's content is family-friendly. After her accounts were banned, she sifted through Juneteenth photos that were posted elsewhere on Facebook to see if they could have triggered the AI bots, but found nothing. Then Ms. Rodney recalled that shortly before Meta canceled her accounts, the company had alerted her about suspicious logins from Seattle and Singapore, even though she lives in Atlanta. It was a sign that her accounts had been hacked. 6 of her Instagram and Facebook accounts for various businesses and personal profiles were banned. To get those accounts back, Ms. Rodney said she had submitted identification documents, filed complaints with the Better Business Bureau and Federal Trade Commission, reached out to state consumer protection offices, and messaged Meta employees on LinkedIn. Nothing worked. Since then, Juneteenth New York has had to convince sponsors that it is a legitimate organization that has been around for nearly 2 decades. Our sponsors go to our social media page to confirm that we are a valid organization, that we have been doing this for 17 years, Ms. Rodney said. So now when they go to our account and see 500 people, they're like, you haven't been doing this, you all are a fraud. After the Times flagged the 5 banned accounts to Meta, the company said it investigated and found that 2 were the result of hacks and 1 was for a legitimate reason. The hacked accounts were rightfully banned because the hackers violated child safety policies, Meta said. Meta then restored the 2 hacked accounts, including Ms. Rodney's Juneteenth NY account. 2 of the 5 accounts flagged were mistakenly banned, including those of the Hansons, the company said. Roberto Suarez, an Instagram influencer who had built a following of more than 500,000 users before he was banned this year, was one of those who received an email from Meta that his account was restored, along with his photos, followers, messages, and more. He started posting content again to fans who had not heard from him in months. A few weeks later, Meta sent him another email. Your account has been suspended. It read, claiming that he had violated copyright laws on his content. If you don't take action, your account will be permanently disabled. Mr. Suarez denied violating any copyright. Shortly after the Times asked about the new ban, his account was restored again. Ms. Hansen also received an email from Meta that her account was back. We reviewed your account and found that the activity on it does follow our community standards on fraud and deception, so you can use Instagram again, the message read. We're sorry we got this wrong. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. China has a real chicken and egg problem. China consumes more eggs per capita than almost every other country, so a recent spike in costs is touching a nerve. In China, the humble egg, a longtime supporting act in many dishes, is now center stage. Around dining room tables, budget-conscious families are griping about its sudden spike in price. In the countryside, befuddled farmers who complained of a glut of eggs last year now fret about scarcity. At food stalls, frustrated cooks are reeling from the 1-2 punch of egg prices and rising energy costs from the Iran war. Even state media has taken to using the term rocket eggs to describe skyrocketing prices. Egg prices are up by more than 40% from a year ago, according to an index that tracks the top producing provinces. They recently hit a 10-year high by another benchmark that tracks prices at a wholesale market in Guangzhou in northern China, catching industry insiders by surprise. In a country that consumes more eggs per capita than almost any other in the world, the surging price is especially painful, and it has become a paradox in an economy still struggling to shake off widespread deflation, in which industrial overcapacity and reluctant consumers have led to falling prices for several years. The price of pork, for example, recently hit a 16-year low. The war in Iran has pushed up energy prices and stoked nascent inflation, but this has been accompanied by a slowdown in economic growth, an unwelcome combination. The price of eggs is the kind of issue that can hit a nerve, and not only in China. The United States had its own egg crisis not long ago because of a supply chain snarl and an avian influenza outbreak. Eggs became a talking point during the 2024 presidential election campaign, with Donald J. Trump using the rising cost of groceries to berate his opponents. In China, the problem began with over-enthusiastic poultry farmers. 2 years ago, farmers started expanding after several bumper years, adding more egg-laying hens from 2024 to 2025 than ever before, according to Aspen Lee, an analyst who studies the egg market. Suddenly, there were too many eggs and the price plunged. Farmers then found themselves short of money to feed all of their chickens, so they culled them at a rate that experts considered excessive. Eventually, there were not enough egg-laying hens to meet demand, sending prices to levels that Mr. Lee said were even higher than my expectations. At the same time, demand has been particularly strong, which economists attribute to various factors like hungry teenagers studying for a high-stakes national exam and the summer celebration known as Dragon Boat Festival. And some pin the blame for climbing costs on one person, President Trump. The war in Iran has made cooking gas pricier. Owners at one restaurant in the coastal town of Tianjin stuck a sign in their storefront window to explain that they were raising the price of xianbing, a crepe of eggs, greens, and deep-fried crackers, by the equivalent of 7 cents because of Trump driving up prices. Exxon Boa, age 25, who runs 2 stalls called Jinping Man in the eastern city of Zhenhu, says he can't pass the cost of his savory egg pancakes on to his regular clients. If you raise the price, people just won't buy them anymore, he said. Mr. Bu goes through 360 eggs every 2 to 3 days, and he's seen the price tick upward by a few cents each time he restocks. A carton, which once cost $25, is now $35. To make things worse, the gas canisters he needs to heat his pan also have risen to $22 each from $16 a purchase he has to make every 5 days. You bustle around month after month, and by the end of it, there's simply nothing left, he said. Unlike meat, eggs aren't easily substituted, said Helen Zhang in the eastern province of Jiangsu, who, together with her boyfriend, consumes as many as 7 eggs a day for breakfast, scrambled in dishes with tomatoes for lunch, and as batter for rice cakes. It accounts for 1/10 of their monthly food bill, Ms. Zhang said. But no matter how expensive eggs get, you still have to eat, she said. Prices go up, but you can't skip your protein. Harriet Hua from the southern province of Guangdong noticed that the price of eggs started creeping up in April on the grocery buying platform she uses, known as Pinduoduo. They have since risen by 20%. My first reaction was, oh my God, why is it so expensive? So I stopped buying them, thinking I'd wait for the price to drop, said Miss Hua, who normally buys a batch of 30 eggs each month. While she was jobless for 6 months, even the smallest price increase was painful. The price never did stop, said Miss Hua, who landed a new job last month. Eventually, I just had to buy them anyway. Now on the American road, bulletproof cars. Drivers are paying for amenities once reserved for banks, law enforcement, and the military. Mark Burton has been caught in some sticky situations. He was in Amsterdam, he said, when a gang tried to kidnap him. His bodyguard twice thwarted attempted robberies in Mexico, and in the early 1990s, when he was in the early stages of starting his armored car business, he was dining in a restaurant in Peru when a bomb blew out the windows. It's been a fascinating ride, he said. Burton is the founder and chief executive of ArmorMax, a company in Ogden, Utah, that, much like Burton himself, does not traffic in nuance. The homepage of the ArmorMax website gets straight to the point. We turn regular vehicles into extraordinary bulletproof machines. While Burton has spent most of his nearly 40 years in the industry decamping to hotspots where his products are most in demand, I call him sometimes and he's like, I'm in Lagos, said Sean Johnson, one of his customers. He no longer needs to travel quite so far from home to help people safeguard their Yukon, Denali, and Cadillac Escalades from potential assault rifle rounds and hand grenade blasts. That's because more and more of those customers are from the United States. According to Burton, domestic sales account for 30% of ArmorMax's overall business, a 6-fold increase from 5 years ago. Other industry leaders have gotten involved too. In 2023, the Toronto-based Incus Armored Vehicle Manufacturing opened its first U.S. dealerships. Miami Armored, complete with a showroom. We serve government, we serve banks, we serve law enforcement, and we serve high net worth individuals, said Philip Daskell, the vice president of Incus USA, but we also serve Plumber Joe, who's driving on the freeway. A stray bullet, these are crazy times, hits the bumper, and he needs to start thinking about taking care of his family. Surging interest in armored cars offers a window into American anxiety. The people who shop at Miami Armored, Daskell said, are concerned about carjackings, smash and grab thefts, and road rage, which has become more prevalent in recent years, according to the Pew Research Center. But there is no doubt that for some, an armored car is a status symbol, the ultimate luxury accessory for 1%ers who already own panic rooms, guard dogs, and perhaps a desert bunker or two. Burton said that 5 of the 20 wealthiest Americans are among ArmorMax's clients, and we've done multiple vehicles for some of them, he said. All that protection doesn't come cheap. Armoring packages generally start at around $50,000 in addition to the original cost of the vehicle itself. Within the industry, the manufacturing process follows the same broad contours. A vehicle is stripped of its exterior paneling all the way down to the frame, and then armoring is installed within the cavity along with ballistic glass and a host of other custom features. For Miami Armored and ArmorMax, discretion is paramount. In most cases, Daskell said, it can be difficult to tell that a vehicle has been retrofitted with bulletproof material. Consider its stealth wealth. You don't want to advertise that you're driving around in an armored car, he said. Johnson, the ArmorMax customer, enlisted Burton to armor his Mercedes-Benz G-Class SUV, aka G-Wagon, after hearing about the company from a family friend who owns a professional sports team. It was 2021 during the pandemic when cash and grab thefts were on the rise. Burton returned the vehicle to Johnson after about 6 weeks. Nobody notices that it's armored, Johnson, who works in the gambling industry and lives in Las Vegas, said. Even valets have no idea. A century ago, steel was used to armor vehicles. The problem, steel is extremely heavy. In the 1920s, for example, at the height of his underworld activities, Al Capone's steel-plated Cadillac town sedan weighed 7 tons, according to Jonathan Eeg in the 2010 biography, Get Capone, the secret plot that captured America's most wanted gangster. ArmorMax now uses a synthetic fiber laminate that weighs 3 pounds per square foot, which typically adds less than 500 pounds to a vehicle equipped with a handgun-level protection, Burton said. ArmorMax, Burton said, has retrofitted more than 10,000 vehicles since its inception. And while most are bound for overseas destinations, Burton said he has been hearing from a growing number of American families who were concerned about safety. It started during COVID with the riots, he said. These people are looking for peace of mind. Historically, law-abiding motorists are not the only ones who have sought bulletproof protection for their vehicles. Miami Armored has an in-house compliance department that conducts due diligence on potential customers, including full background checks. For companies that are purchasing vehicles, Miami Armored requires passport copies from all shareholders listed in the articles of incorporation. Like Daskell, Burton said his customers were thoroughly vetted. Do we deal with the mobsters? No, Burton said. Do we deal with the cartels? Absolutely not. We don't deal in cash, so that's another big factor. The other thing to remember is that these are defensive vehicles. It's not like we're putting rocket launchers on them. Then again, not everyone wants to blend in. Karen Kobashi, a former producer in the entertainment industry, owns a Rezvani tank, a street-legal $350,000 behemoth that comes equipped with ballistics armoring, electrified door handles, a ramming bumper, thermal night vision, and gas masks. She paid extra for side windows that go down. I need to be able to hit the drive-thru at In-N-Out Burger, Kobayashi said. The vehicle is a monster. If Optimus Prime from the Transformers and a Jeep Wrangler had a baby, it would be the Rezvani tank. Kobayashi, who is 5 feet 7 inches tall, says she feels like a Tyrannosaurus Rex whenever she drives it. If we make a wrong turn and we're caught in some sort of protest, I feel safe, she said. Faris Rezvani, the founder of Rezvani Motors, said in an interview that his childhood love of fighter planes and the powerfulness they evoked inspired him to start his company in 2014. Based in Irvine, California, Rezvani Motors produces 30 to 50 vehicles a year. Half of them armored. Models include the Vengeance and the Beast. They are not for introverts. You definitely have a lot of conversations at the gas station, Rezvani said. For Kobayashi, a life in the public lens prompted her desire for additional security. Her husband, Jim Jacobs, co-wrote the musical Grease, and their son, Tobin Jacobs, 24, has a large social media following as an anime artist and content creator. The family also has a Lamborghini Urus, 2 Porsches, and a Mercedes-Benz Coupe. But I needed at least one car that has some kind of armoring, Kobayashi said, adding, Tobin's young, so I started to see a lot of weird stalker-type people, and this is a generation that I have no idea what's going through their minds. The general state of the world hardly helps, said Kobayashi, who described herself as a prepper. All civilizations kind of crash after 250 years, she said. I'm not saying there's a zombie apocalypse coming, she said, but we're prepared. She knows she's not alone in her upscale neighborhood north of San Diego. Everyone here has money, Kobayashi said, and everyone has bulletproof cars, even if some are more noticeable than others. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Does lymphatic drainage massage make your skin healthier? The technique has been used to increase circulation and in some cases reduce fluid buildup. Whether it tightens and brightens your skin is less clear. By sweeping your fingers across your cheeks and jawline and then down your neck, you can remove excess fluid from your face. Many social media influencers claim this technique, known as lymphatic drain massage, offers health benefits for your skin, making it tighter and brighter and reducing puffiness, but does it? The gentle rhythmic movements of lymphatic drainage massage help disperse a clear fluid called lymph that circulates through the body's lymphatic system and can pool in your facial tissues, causing swelling. Lymph can build up for several reasons, including sleeping poorly, eating salty foods, drinking alcohol, being dehydrated, or sleeping on your back, said Dr. Arpana A. Shaw, a dermatologist at MedStar Health in St. Mary's County, Maryland. All these little things can give you a more bloated appearance, she said. Lymphatic fluid usually drains naturally throughout the day, but gentle massage can sometimes speed up this dispersion, and it is often recommended to treat lymphedema, chronic swelling that most commonly occurs in the arms and legs. Though there is limited evidence on the effectiveness of facial lymphatic drainage massage, Dr. Shaw said it can promote relaxation and increase blood flow to the skin, which may offer some marginal decrease in the puffiness of the face or other aesthetic benefits. What is lymphatic drainage massage? The lymphatic system, Dr. Shaw said, is like the housekeeper of our body. This network of organs, tissues, and vessels moves excess lymph from your tissues to the bloodstream, helping the body maintain its fluid balance. It also transports fluid through the lymph nodes, where immune cells destroy harmful substances like bacteria and viruses. Several factors can disrupt the lymphatic system and cause fluid to accumulate in your face or elsewhere in the body, including surgery, lymphedema, a high-salt diet, or being overweight or too sedentary, said Dr. Roy Kim, a plastic surgeon in San Francisco. He said he often recommends lymphatic drainage massage after some cosmetic surgeries because it has been shown to improve pain and swelling during recovery. Gravity and movement will eventually drain the fluid, he said, but you can speed this along through gentle stroking to move excess fluid from your tissues, coaxing it toward the lymph nodes. This can be done by a massage therapist, or Dr. Kim said you can massage yourself using your fingertips, a facial roller, or gua sha, in which you gently scrape a stone along the contours of your face. Does it offer aesthetic benefits? Some TikTok creators claim that performing lymphatic drainage massage on your face or neck can minimize puffiness, address conditions like acne, improve circulation, promote relaxation, and remove toxins from the skin. But there is little research to back up the idea that it can improve the health or appearance of your skin. A 2025 study of 34 women who used facial rollers or gua sha for 8 weeks found that they experienced some limited improvements in aspects of facial contour, including skin elasticity and muscle tone. Another study published in 2018, including 19 men and 7 women, it found that using a facial massage roller on one cheek for 5 weeks increased blood flow to that cheek, but the results lasted for just 10 minutes after each massage. These studies included a small number of subjects and lasted only a few weeks, not long enough to assess facial lymphatic drainage massage's long-term effects, Dr. Shaw said. She added that larger, longer-term studies were needed to prove the benefit. In general, doctors say lymphatic drainage massage may improve your skin in a few weeks. Because it moves lymphatic fluid around, it can make skin appear less puffy. Dr. Shaw said, rolling or massaging your face also just feels good and can help you relax and reduce stress, she added. Stress can worsen skin conditions like acne and eczema, and stress hormones may deplete collagen and elastin, accelerating wrinkles and other signs of aging, according to the American Academy of Dermatology. Facial lymphatic drainage massage can also improve circulation to the skin, said Dr. Kenneth Mark, a cosmetic dermatologist in New York City, and because increasing blood flow nourishes the skin and encourages new immune cells to gather there, it can reduce inflammation and stimulate collagen production, he said. But the results, Dr. Kim noted, are typically marginal and short-term. Should you try it? Although lymphatic drainage massage may not provide striking results or offer any lasting improvements, there's not really any downside, Dr. Kim said. The massage method is safe and relaxing for most people, and facial rollers and gua sha tools are inexpensive, costing about $10 to $20. If you're curious to try it, he said, wash your face to start and make sure your hands or massage tools are clean. Some people apply moisturizer, serums, or other skincare products with facial rollers or gua sha tools. Use light pressure, said Lily Benek, medical director of massage therapy at University Hospitals in Cleveland. Massage in one direction at a time, not back and forth. Up away from the center of the face toward the neck, hairline, or ear, she said. Then massage the neck and around the clavicle. Repeat those movements for about 5 minutes. Applying too much pressure or massaging too aggressively could cause bruising, irritation, or swelling, or you could break blood vessels, which isn't harmful but may look unsightly, the experts said. If you're unsure about the proper technique, Dr. Beck recommended seeing a massage therapist for guidance. And if your face is chronically puffy, no matter what you do, Dr. Shaw suggested seeing a doctor to rule out a medical condition like an allergy, lymphedema, or hormonal changes. To confront my fear of heights, I crossed a chasm on a cable. A jittery hiker signed up for a Via Ferrata tour on the cliffs of an Adirondack gorge, and here's what he learned on the ledges, rungs, and exposed bridges. I stood perched on a ledge, a river churning some 30 feet below, and a line of people waiting at my back, a suspension bridge with 3 cables, 1 for my feet and 2 for my hands, stretched across the chasm like a tightrope. A tremor was already creeping up my legs, and I had nowhere to go but forward. Like everyone on the tour of the AuSable Chasm, a gorge carved into the Adirondacks in upstate New York, I wore a harness to catch me if I fell. Maybe it would save my life, but it didn't too much to ease my anxiety. We were following a Via Ferrata, Italian for iron path, that zigzagged across the gorge and took us high onto its sandstone walls, clinging to metal rungs, unclipping and reclipping the 2 safety lines on our harnesses. This exhilarating route was admittedly a bizarre choice for someone like me, who struggles with a paralyzing fear of heights. But that was precisely why I was standing before this swaying tightrope bridge. The Via Ferrata tour was just the latest round in my years-long regimen of self-directed exposure therapy, which had already taken me onto scary rock scrambles and exposed summits across the Adirondacks in an attempt to cure my acrophobia. "Don't lead me to my death," joked the woman behind me as I tested the cable's give. "I'll do my best," I said. Another step took me past the ledge, leaving nothing but open air and crashing white water below. A natural next step. Søren Kierkegaard, the 19th century Danish philosopher and father of existentialism, saw in the fears of heights a metaphor for all human anxiety. Standing at a precipice, Kierkegaard imagined a person becoming instantly and acutely aware of their power to jump, and with it the dizzying breadth of human freedom. I can't say that heights have ever granted me such an epiphany, but I know that something has always drawn me towards them. Despite my trepidation, it was although hiking that I began to test the limits of that attraction. I fell in love with hiking while I was living in Albany, New York, a gateway city to the peaks and cliffs of the Adirondacks. There I gradually probed the limits of my fear, pushing myself closer to the edges of mountain overlooks, and then seeking out increasingly challenging routes that tested both my footing and my nerve. It turns out there's science behind that approach. Incremental exposure therapy remains a gold standard for treating the fear of heights, said Dorothy Bentz, a clinical psychologist and researcher at the University of Basel in Switzerland. "If people are treated, there's a response rate of about 80%, said Dr. Bentz. "But people have to engage," she added, "and that means you have to expose yourself." A Via Ferrata seemed like the natural next step in that process. Despite their dramatic vertical settings, Via Ferratas are, in terms of technical difficulty, not that far removed from a playground jungle theme. Climbers are harnessed into the entire route, keeping at least 1 carabiner clipped to the safety cable at all times. Though the danger is limited, the exposure is not exactly the type of challenging I was seeking. Modern Via Ferratas were largely a product of World War I, developed as a makeshift system to move troops through the Dolomites that the Italian and Austro-Hungarian armies fought over the peaks, and in time those early installations would be refined into recreational climbing routes featuring metal rungs and hanging bridges. From the Alps they spread worldwide, allowing thrill seekers everywhere to navigate sheer cliff faces and deep canyons. Though Via Ferratas have flourished in the United States in recent years, options near New York City remain limited for the casual day hiker on a budget. The adventure trail at the AuSable Chasm, a privately owned attraction just south of Plattsburgh, New York, was both inexpensive, about $20 for entry to the chasm, $45 for the Via Ferrata, and approachable. Clipped in, I drove up to the Adirondacks in late May, a few weeks ahead of peak tourist season, and headed to the chasm early the next morning to book a slot. Looking down from the rim of the gorge, I got my first glimpse of the Via Ferrata. I saw 4 cable bridges over the river, stretches of rock ledges and metal rungs. Sure, I thought I could manage that. Half an hour later, our 42-year-old guide, Colby Walker, was showing me roughly 12-person tour group how to clip and unclip our harnesses around obstructions. I wound up at the front of the line, and I was the first to follow Colby onto the initial bridge. Out over the drop, I began thinking in fractions. Just get a quarter of the way across, now half, now 2/3. My stomach dropped every time my harness hit an obstacle. But with Colby and Catherine's encouragement, I finally conquered Zeno's paradox, the notion that if you do something in fractions, you'll never reach the end. It turned out Jacqueline and I had both taken the same approach to exposure therapy, albeit in different parts of the country. "I'm not as scared of heights as I used to be," she said, "but it's still not comfortable." I sympathized. How it is, I thought. The initial rush of panic still finds me. Later, safely back in my Brooklyn apartment, I told Dr. Bentz about my moments of panic. Could any amount of exposure therapy, I wonder, ever fully banish the former? In other words, courage takes practice. I'd face the dizzying prospect of my own freedom and the choice to turn back or step out over the void, and in doing so, to keep pushing the boundaries of my fear. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the July 22nd issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Claudia, and I thank you for listening.